What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So ever since Starfield and Redfall were delayed into 2023, I've noticed there's been a bit of a shift in sentiment around Game Pass Online, and now we're to the point where Game Pass Burnout is being brought up, and we're going to go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about those PlayStation original games that'll be heading into PlayStation Plus Premium, as it's been discovered that Sony's doing some very weird things when it comes to emulation for these titles, and we're also going to be talking about one of the worst decisions, I would say, that Microsoft has made, this being back in 2014 when they were approached by Marvel to make exclusive games. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps it a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all of the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Geoff Keighly, Summer Games Fest, and maybe what we can expect over the next month or so when it comes to all these different publishers and developers looking to announce some of their games. Think of Capcom or Take-Two. We know there's Summer Games Fest, we assume there'll be a Direct, and we know that there's an Xbox showcase. So now the question is, will there be other showcases for these different companies? Well, Geoff Keighly did talk in a Twitter Spaces about this. He says, there are a lot of shows last year where everyone was disappointed when they weren't really press conferences, right? Like Take-Two, Capcom, Square Enix, and things like that. I think they have learned that if you're going to a press conference, you kind of need to have 30 minutes plus of stuff, and sometimes they only have one or two great games to show, which may not be enough to do a full event around. So I think that's going to be a bit of a shift. I have a pretty good sense of what's coming in the next month. I think people will be hyped about games in general, and then obviously people will also be disappointed. I think it's impossible to have a perfect showcase or gaming event. There's always going to be some sort of announcement that's left out that people are hopeful for, but I think it's a better idea to just basically pile into things like Summer Games Fest or have some third-party announcements in a Direct or a PlayStation Showcase or a Microsoft Showcase, because we've seen what happens when Capcom attempts to stretch out a showcase. Doesn't go so well, right? You need multiple big-time announcements. So I think for third-party publishers, it's a good idea to get some of those big titles and smaller titles even into some of these like platform holder showcases. Everyone kind of get together, and it's a bit easier to hold up like a 40-minute presentation. Also, what we're going to be talking about, the emulation around these PS1 games on the PlayStation Plus Premium service. It does appear that the trophies for these games are going live, and they're a bit more in-depth than I was expecting, because originally we weren't sure if they'd be there in the first place, but like Wild Arms, as an example, that will be in this service as the trophies were revealed. It looks like there are different sets for PS4 and PS5, but if you like kind of scroll through just Wild Arms trophies, they actually go into different events that happen in the game, different things you can accomplish when it comes to upgrading, for example. And it just looks like someone who knows the game pretty well went through and just dropped them into different milestones, which I gotta admit, I was expecting a couple of trophies and one of them being just like, hey, you completed the game, good job, that being the platinum trophy. So it's pretty cool to see that they at least spent some time with these trophies, especially if you've played through these games maybe a bunch of times. You can look back now and be like, oh, I'll go through, I'll get these trophies. I even know where a lot of these spots are, but maybe you come across that game that you thought you were familiar with and you see a trophy and you're like, I did not know that was something in the game. So it'll be cool to go through all these different lists as they pop up. Oh, and I feel like we talk about this a lot, especially with some of these different companies like Sega, for example, but how about Capcom and reviving their dormant IPs? This we can see over on VGC, saying Capcom has suggested during a new investor relations Q&A that it could revive some of its dormant game series. This during an investor's briefing with Capcom, saying, we are currently putting together plans for our pipeline based on demand data from the market. This in response to, what are you guys going to do with some of those intellectual properties that are just sitting up on the shelf? So I don't know, you think of Beautiful Joe, that's popular one. A Breath of Fire, would be kind of cool. Power Stone, could they bring back Power Stone now? Maybe a new Onimusha. There are a lot of things they could go back and do, but they just really haven't. And sure, that could mean they do things like we see with Mega Man Legacy Collection. Maybe they do something with Power Stone and they just do a little collection and throw it out there. Just something's better than nothing at this point. But yeah, let's do something with Mega Man. I know I bring that up every time, but Capcom really should be looking back at their catalog right now that they haven't touched in a while and just see what they can make happen. I mean, who doesn't want to see a new Beautiful Joe? And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Game Pass Burnout, at least what's kind of been brought up here now by Kotaku. Take a look at this. This is an article that was posted up. After years of hype, the Xbox Game Pass Burnout is here. A drought of AAA games has spurred some to unsub from Microsoft Games on Demand service for now. And they quote several people on Twitter, like Gene Park, for example, says, yeah, I'm unsubscribing from Xbox Game Pass for the first time ever. Gotta admit to myself, I barely use it and barely have use for it now. I'll be back, but for now, there's no point. And I also saw MVG mentioned that he just unsubscribed months ago. There's not a lot there to really get excited about in the short term. And what's really funny, though, is Xbox Game Pass decided to reply to Kotaku's tweet for this article. They said, tell me you limit yourself to only AAA games without telling me you limit yourself to only AAA games. And I think you could at least take Burnout and say, you're tired of waiting for games to hit this service that Microsoft has built up anticipation for, at least a vision of Game Pass. You know, like, that's the biggest thing here. And you look at the gap in time now when Halo Infinite's campaign released in December to where we are now in May. I mean, yeah, you're looking at like 6 months where there hasn't been that big first-party AAA game that's dropped in the service. And that's the big selling point. I get what Xbox Game Pass is saying. Hey, there are other games that drop on the service, right? Like Trek to Yomi, that just dropped in to Game Pass. You can just download it right away on release. Sniper Elite, the newest one, is going in tomorrow, and I'm actually going to download it on there and try it out. It's been a while since I've played a Sniper Elite game, and I figure, hey, it's going to Game Pass. Why not check it out? But in the short term, after Starfield and Redfall got pushed into next year, I understand people will look around and say it's a month-to-month service. I don't really need it right now. The back catalog of Game Pass isn't that interesting for me right this second, so maybe I just won't pay next month, and I'll see if Microsoft can compel me to sign up again, because it is Microsoft's job to sell you on Game Pass. Now, I've said before, and I'm sure I'll say it many, many times this year, I believe 2023 is when things will finally get set into motion for Microsoft. Their 2021 at least finished up fairly strong, right? Like Psychonauts 2, that was pretty cool to get dropped into the service and just be able to download. Halo Infinite's campaign was all right. Halfway through, it just turned into another Halo game. They didn't really leverage the open world as much there, but it was still an enjoyable experience for what it was. And Forza Horizon 5, which you look back was one of the best rated games of the year. It was a pretty good couple of months there for Game Pass. But with anticipation and hype for something like Starfield basically disappearing for 2022, yeah, you're going to have people unsubscribe, and that's what we're seeing now. Just a lot of people talking about how they just aren't that interested right this second. But I do think in the future, if everything lines up as Microsoft continues to sell people on with that hype, yeah, eventually Game Pass will have a big game releasing into the service every 2 to 3 months alongside of these smaller indie titles that are very nice complements to those big AAA games. So, like I said, 2023, probably when things will really start to pick up for Microsoft. In the short term, though, we could see some things announced at the showcase, like that Gears of War Master Chief-esque collection. We're expecting Forza Motorsport, and then who knows, maybe Microsoft makes a 0-hour deal for a big AAA title like Gotham Knights getting released into the service later on this year. But until that showcase, I get why people are just like, hey, you know what? I'll be back when Starfield releases next year. Next up, let's talk about a pretty bad decision. Looking back on it now, again, hindsight's 2020, for Microsoft after Marvel approached them in 2014 to make exclusive titles with something like Spider-Man. Well, we can see this posted up. This over on PlayStation Lifestyle, however, it was brought up for the first time on Reset Era. This, according to Ultimate History of Video Games, Volume 2. Now, Jae Ong had been representing Marvel and was going between some of the different platform holders. They, of course, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, kind of put Nintendo to the side because they mostly, as they say, look towards their own intellectual properties to build on, but going to Sony or Microsoft, they could pitch the idea of Spider-Man or really any one intellectual property that they had in their universe. And they even brought up the idea of it competing with Batman Arkham, like Asylum, Arkham City. I mean, that's the impact that the Arkham series had, is Marvel looked at that and said, well, we want our own series like that. However, as it says here, when Ong approached Microsoft, the company told him that it was prioritizing their own intellectual properties and passed up a deal. Sony's Adam Boyes and John Drake, on the other hand, were interested in the proposal. And it goes on, obviously, as we know now, to kind of bring up the idea of having Spider-Man be a PlayStation exclusive game, big budget, all of this, and hand it off to Insomniac, who at the time was a second party for Sony. And the rest is history. We get an awesome Spider-Man game from Sony and Insomniac. And obviously it's easy to look back now and be like, what was Microsoft thinking? But this was 2014. And if you remember, 2014 was not a good year for Microsoft. There were talks that Microsoft was going to look to basically cut out the Xbox division. And if you remember, at the end of that year, I think it was like September, October, we got the news that Microsoft had acquired Mojang, of course, creators of Minecraft, and apparently that deal came from a meeting that Phil Spencer had with Satya Nadella. Going into that meeting, Satya Nadella had his mind made up of, okay, we're kind of done with Xbox, we're gonna wind it down after what happened launching 2013 and then going into 2014. Didn't look like it was going to be working out, and somehow Phil Spencer walked in and then walked out, convincing Nadella to spend $2.5 billion on Minecraft. So Marvel just kind of showed up at one of the worst times they could have possibly shown up to try to pitch something like that to Microsoft. Although I will say for Spider-Man, this probably was the best outcome, since clearly Sony and Insomniac came up with a really good Spider-Man game, because before that it was like with Activision, and apparently Marvel ended their deal with Activision early so that they could work with Insomniac and Sony. And I mean, the rest is history. Great games here so far. Looking forward to Spider-Man 2. I enjoyed Miles Morales, but wow, what a miss by Microsoft. I almost wonder if Marvel had gone to Xbox or Microsoft in 2015 after they were clearly much more interested in the Xbox brand, if they would have pulled the trigger on something like the Hulk. I mean, Microsoft can still do that technically, like make a Hulk game, and I think that would be a really good avenue for them. Obviously, green matches up with the Xbox brand, but like, the Hulk Ultimate Destruction is a really fun, underrated game on like the original Xbox now. So like, if they could look at that and say, how can we make a big AAA Hulk game, and which internal studio we have now that they've been accruing could make that, I think that'd be a lot of fun to see what they come up with. Next up, let's talk about those PlayStation 1 classics that'll be part of that PlayStation Plus premium tier. There's been a lot of good news coming out about them so far, with a lot of the options around filters and kind of the scaling and the trophies, of course. But unfortunately, it looks like it's going to have quite a bit in common with that PlayStation 1 classic. And we know how the emulation went over there, because they ran at 50 hertz, which was a really juddery experience. It unfortunately looks like these PlayStation 1 classics for this new subscription coming up will be doing the same. Take a look at this. This was a tweet sent out by the Marmalade. Says, looks like PS1 classics are using 50 hertz PAL versions instead of NTSC. NTSC PS1 feels much smoother than emulated versions. And if you look at like Digital Foundry, they did their whole PlayStation 1 classic analysis and found that the experience wasn't great when it came to the frame pacing, because they had 50 hertz then running through like 60 hertz NTSC. And well, I mean, here's a video that was posted up kind of showcasing what that frame timing looks like with Ape Escape PS1 on the PS5 frame rate. And yeah, not great. And unfortunately, it is something you can feel pretty easily. And it gets a bit worse than this. It's not just like, oh, it's just Ape Escape maybe, or maybe another title. It looks like it's all of them so far. Andy Robinson actually confirmed this, saying VGC has verified that the PAL version of Ape Escape is what's being offered on the Taiwan PS Store, a region which uses the NTSC video format. He continues saying all first-party PS1 games included in the new PS Plus in Taiwan appear to be based on the PAL 50 hertz versions I've confirmed. See, we spent all this time talking about how great the trophy support is and the rewinding and the cool filters, and then basically something that fundamentally damages the experience through the emulation is present here, much like that PS1 Classic. I feel like the feedback for that PlayStation Classic should have been overwhelming to Sony, where they at least bare minimum were like, hey, let's not use the PAL versions of these games running at 50 hertz for the rest of the world. I mean, even when we had the Nintendo 64 expansion pack come out, that we saw it was like 50 hertz in parts of Europe, from what I remember, but you could change it. And in fact, when they did release it in North America, there's just the NTSC version you could use. I'm like really hopeful, crossing my fingers, that it shows up, say, third week in June, like it's scheduled to come out in North America. Okay, and it's 60 hertz. But based on what I saw with PS1 Classic, based on what I'm seeing here now, I'm not holding my breath, and that is going to be a very unfortunate release when it happens. Who knows, maybe Sony sees the feedback happening now and they pivot a bit and change things up, but I am curious why they're doing this in the first place, and maybe someone in the comments can explain exactly why they are stuck on these 50 Hz PAL versions of the game. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the UK sales charts, and specifically one title that has shot up the charts. We can see this, the top 10, with Horizon Forbidden West at number 1, Switch Sports 2, then we have LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Minecraft on the Switch, Grand Theft Auto 5, FIFA 22, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and Gran Turismo 7. Now, you may be curious why Horizon Forbidden West has continued to not only climb the charts, but top the charts here at number 1, jumping from 3 up to the top. And a lot of this has to do with that bundle that released. Remember that we had talked about the PS5 getting this bundle with Horizon Forbidden West and how it was spotted in Europe. And yeah, there you have it, them packaging it with the PS5, which when the PS5 is just in stock, it already pulls up some of these different games at retail. And I mean, you package it with it, then yeah, you're going to have it jump to the top of the sales charts. That, and you couple it with it just being kind of a quiet period right now in May for brand new boxed releases. And there you have it, Horizon Forbidden West, a game that came out earlier this year and has, I mean, really flown under the radar after Elden Ring came out and absolutely blew it out of the water with Metacritic score and hype online. Horizon Forbidden West, I've been playing actually several times a week now, and I am really enjoying my time with it. I think I'm coming up on like 50 hours now in the game, and it's an absolute blast. So while I understand it got ran over by Elden Ring, it's good to see that it continues to sell well, even though it is part of like a bundle for the PS5. When the PS5 went in stock in the UK sales charts previously, Horizon Forbidden West just continued to kind of climb its way up. So who knows? Maybe this is a bundle that Sony continues to leverage, especially going into the holidays worldwide. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, are you keeping Xbox Game Pass for the rest of 2022 after the Starfield and Redfall delays? 43% said yes, I still use the library that's there. 16% said no, I might resub when Microsoft announces more games. And then 41% said no, I never had it or I'm not interested. And I saw many people in the comments say, hey, I mean, a lot of cool games do get thrown in there. Indie titles, yes. And sure, the big AAA titles aren't necessarily there, especially in 2022, but they will be eventually, and I'm at least enjoying the catalog that's there now. But I guess if you are someone who was signed up for Starfield or for Redfall eventually happening sometime this year, you may be put off and looking into next year. But I will say there is a pretty good library of titles, and if you just pick up an Xbox Series S or X, and you're like, okay, well, how do I get started? I mean, a 1-month subscription to Game Pass just to check things out isn't a bad idea. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from SCJ saying, I think after their recent fallout with FIFA and the naming rights to the series, EA is finally realizing how fast the stock around their IPs is falling, and they probably want to cash in while there's still time. I used to love their IPs such as Battlefield or Battlefield Bad Company, Madden, FIFA, Star Wars Battlefront, Need for Speed, etc. And I haven't bought one of those games in years because of how far they've fallen off. I did enjoy Need for Speed Heat, and if you like Need for Speed like years and years ago, I think it's worth checking that one out. It's always like $10 or something on sale. And hey, a new Need for Speed is coming up this year, so we'll see how that one turns out. But like Battlefield, yeah, Battlefield's fallen kind of badly with how 2042 turned out. And if you look at like FIFA and Madden and NHL, those are all tied up with different leagues. So you got to look to their original IPs, which Mass Effect, well, Andromeda didn't do that any favors, and Dragon Age has been missing for a while. So I think right now EA realizes, wow, a lot of these acquisitions are worth a lot of money. This may be the most we're ever valued, so it's time to look around and make a deal, because even they're probably thinking, I don't know if we're going to be able to beat expectations with microtransactions for something like a renamed FIFA title and so on there. So that's kind of where I think their mindset is right now. It's time to sell high. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whereas Game Pass Burnout, are you someone who put your subscription on hold when Starfield and Redfall got delayed, or are you hanging out and just kind of enjoying the current catalog? And then also, what about these PS1 games using the 50 Hz PAL version? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.